So, without further ado, the reason you came here tonight is to hear Senator Rick Santorum, so let me hand the program over to him. Would you give him a warm welcome?
Thank you. Thank you very much, April. It's great to be here in the Valley, and hopefully that's not giving too much feedback. First and foremost, just thank you for being here. I know in California that being pro-life isn't a particularly popular thing to be. Probably somewhere in the government of California, you're listed as a hate group, and they're watching you and everything you're doing. And to be here in hostile territory and to stand for the truth is a special blessing. And so I want to thank you for your courage in standing for life and standing for truth. In particular, I know there were several legislators here and folks running for the assembly, and I want to make a special point to recognize them because they're in a very, very small minority in Sacramento. And to have the courage, it's one thing to be pro-life. When I ran for Congress, I ran and I was pro-life. I spent 4 years in the House of Representatives and I was pro-life, but I never said the word abortion anywhere because I knew that if I did, well, I'd be labeled. You see, it's one thing to be a conservative, it's one thing to be for less government, lower taxes, and strong military, and all those things that the media hates. But it's different. It's different on the moral and cultural issues. They'll actually give you a pass if you just vote pro-life. But if you actually fight the fight, if you actually try to go out and make changes to the law, to try to make the arguments, they'll punish you. I remember when I came to the United States Senate, and through a very odd series of events, I ended up managing a bill called partial birth abortion, having never spoken about abortion in the House or in a year when I was in the Senate. And I remember after that, having stepped out on that issue, that the newspapers in my state, who used to refer to me as the conservative senator from Pennsylvania. Now, you never see the liberal senator from California. It's just the senator from California, right? But the media always has to put that little moniker, the conservative senator from Pennsylvania. Well, they put a little adjective in there. In fact, my kids for a while thought that my first name was Ultra, because I became the ultra-conservative senator from Pennsylvania. That's what they do. If you speak up on this issue, if you speak up against the culture that the left is trying to indoctrinate into this country, you will pay a price. They will come after you. And so I just want to say to the people here who are running for office and who serve in office, who have the courage to come to a Right to Life dinner and have the courage to go to Sacramento and fight for life, that we owe them a special round of applause for what they're doing. You know, I always find it remarkable that I'm here, because I mentioned that when I ran for office, when I first started running, I didn't even know if I was pro-life or not. It was not an issue as a single male when I decided to run I'd ever really given much thought to. And, well, I eventually decided that I would look at the facts and just decide based on the facts. Well, you've heard the facts. There isn't a biology textbook in America, in the world, that would say other than this: life begins at conception. That is a fact. I was in San Diego on one of these news programs, a few months ago, and a reporter sat down and introduced me, and of course, Rick Santorum, the conservative former senator from Pennsylvania, and he fought all these battles on abortion, and he believes life begins at conception. And I stopped him. I said, "No, I don't." And he just froze. He didn't know what to say. And he looked at the camera. The camera's rolling. It's a live show. He says, I'm sorry. I mean, the information I had said that you believe life begins at conception." I said, "No, I don't. I know life begins at conception." And but you see what they do? They put it into the realm of belief, of faith. You're allowed to your beliefs, I'm allowed to my beliefs, you're allowed your faith, I'm allowed my faith. When it has nothing to do with faith. It has to do with science, has to do with fact. Don't ever say you believe life begins at conception, because it is not a belief. What Tulare Right to Life, King's Right to Life does is provide the facts. That's why it's so important. Language is everything. They twist and turn everything. Whether it's a belief that life begins at conception, or words like marriage equality, or whatever you want to take it. All of these cultural changes that are being forced down our throat come with very wonderful language wrapped in things like our founders would love, like choice. They can't have those words. They don't belong to them because, as April said, they're lies. They're lies. America is hurting. We all know that. We know it's hurting. I mean, you can look at our economy, and my heart goes out to you here in the Central Valley and what the state and the federal government is doing to the people in this community, up and down this valley. You're hurting particularly because of what the government is doing to you. But the government is doing more, and the popular culture and our educational systems. I read a book recently by a man by the name of Andy Andrews. The title of the book's a little itty-bitty book. The title of the book is, "How Do You Kill 11 Million People?" And you quickly find out after reading through it, he talks about Stalin and Hitler and all these things, is you lie. Is you lie. I was just in Israel, Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial. And you look at the lies the German people were told. Oh, these Jews are not human. They're subhuman. It's a lie. But the government said it's the truth. Our Supreme Court said that this blob of tissue, well, we don't know. Read Roe versus Wade, Dolby, but we don't know whether that's real life or not. That's a lie. They knew in 1973 that life began at conception, but they lied. Ladies and gentlemen, Right to Life here in Tulare-kings is about telling the truth. It's about confronting the great lie. The lie that is a cancer that is eating away at America. Oh, there are a lot of issues out there that are causing problems in our society. No doubt about that. We see our culture spinning downward. We wonder whether our children are going to be able to live in a good, moral, and decent society. But let's go back to the foundational issue that started that decline. And it was this issue. Because once government can say, that it has a right, that you have a right to take the life of an innocent child, then sort of all bets are off. If government can say, well, you can take the life of an innocent child in the womb, then why not take an equally disabled or problem at the end of life? Or someone who has a disability? You say it's a slippery slope. The slope is there, it's sliding. Our culture is sliding. 56 million children. Largely because the government said it was legal, it was just, it was right, it was good. The law is a teacher. And the popular culture feeds right into that. How did that happen? How is it that America has changed so much? Is it because most of America feels this way? Most of America is stepping away from the values and virtues that made our country the greatest country in the history of the world? Stepping away from the dignity of all human life? Stepping away from the centrality of marriage and the family? Stepping away from faith? Yes, faith. We are a far less religious country today. How did that happen? How did truth become, well, relative? Your truth, my truth, everybody's entitled to their own truth. How did that happen? Is it because the majority of Americans felt that way? No. No. In fact, if you go back for the last 40 years and you look at polls of people who consider themselves conservatives, who hold traditional values, and those who consider themselves liberal, who hold to progressive values, you'll find identical numbers for almost 40 years in America, holding true still today, believe it or not. That roughly 40% of Americans consider themselves conservatives, traditional values, 15 to 20% liberal, progressive values, secular values. But they're winning. How? How are they winning? How is that possible? If there's twice as many of us as there are of them, how are they winning? I go back to, April mentioned the movie The Patriot. It's a good example. If you go back to 1776 and you look at the situation of the American Revolution, you'll see the British Army, the British Navy, the most powerful in the history of the world. The best equipped, the best trained, the best led. And the American Army, a ragtag group of folks who were basically militiamen, who had adequate, in some cases, in the case of Washington, great leadership, but poor training, poor supplies, and heck, 20% of the American continental population was for the British. There's no way we should have won that war. Well, how did we win? I think if you look at the last phrase of the Declaration of Independence, you'll have the key. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We wanted it more than they did. How are you losing in California? Oh, you're outnumbered now here, but you weren't always. How did that happen? Because they wanted it more than you did. They were willing to work harder than you did. When I say, what do you mean work harder than me? Go to your schools today. Is there a Bible in your school? Oh, you may go to a Christian school or you homeschool. There may be a Bible there, hopefully. But if you go to a public school, no. How did that happen? You let it happen. Well, wait a minute, Senator. The court did that. Yeah, that's right. And you didn't fight back. You know, there was a decision the other day on a Hobby Lobby case. The Supreme Court decided that Hobby Lobby was allowed to run their business. You know what they did the next day? They went out and filed a whole bunch of new suits against other businesses. They lost, but they don't care. They're not going to quit. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep fighting. A loss is a speed bump. They're keeping going. And look at us. Look at us. We sit there and we wait for the Supreme Court to decide what the laws of the country is, and if we lose, we say, oh, shucks, well, better luck next time. We'll move on and dig deeper into our bunkers. They want it more than you do. Why? Let's be honest. Because America's still a pretty great country. We're still pretty free. We're still pretty prosperous. Life is still pretty good in America, certainly compared to the rest of the world. And so you say, well, okay, it's just not a little thing, not a little thing, not a little thing. And now the little things are getting to be bigger things. I ran for office after having served 16 years in the House and Senate. I decided to run for president. Now, to put that in perspective for you a little bit, I was elected twice to the House, twice to the United States Senate from Pennsylvania. But the third time I ran in Pennsylvania, I lost in 2006, which was a bad year for Republicans. But I lost by the largest margin of any incumbent senator in 30 years. I lost big. They were dancing on my grave, I can tell you, because I was the cultural warrior in the United States Senate. And so they got me. All the pro-choice groups, all the gay rights groups, you name it, all the secular groups, they were pouring millions into Pennsylvania to beat me. And they got me. And then I decided, well, it's time to go to the private sector and just get back and take care of, at the time, 6 children. And then Barack Obama got elected, and I decided, you know what? I saw this healthcare thing come, and I said, I just can't sit on the sidelines. I got to get out there and speak about what was going to happen. Because by then, we were blessed with another baby, a little girl named Bella, who had a disability called trisomy 18, which is a death sentence. It's in the medical literature. If you look up trisomy 18, the words next to it are incompatible with life. But we had fought for 3 years. Bella was alive and doing well. And I saw Obamacare as the greatest threat to my little girl. Because I know what government-run medicine means. I know what it means, particularly to those who are vulnerable. And I thought, there's no way I can sit on the sideline. I've got to go out and fight this battle. And so I just went out and started talking. I was invited to come and give a speech in Iowa. I don't even know, I think I'd been to Iowa once before in my life, but I asked to go to a speech in Iowa back in 2009 or 10. And so I went out there and announced I was going out there, and a reporter called me and said, oh, you're running for president. I said, well, I got invited to give a speech in Iowa. Oh, so you're not running for president? I said, no, I didn't say I'm not running for president. I'm just going to give a speech in Iowa. Oh, so you are running for president? This is an actual conversation. And I said, well, I'm not, I'm just giving a speech. And so the next day, Politico was the name of the magazine, runs a headline, Santorum going to Iowa considering running for president. Now, I found that, I've heard about that when I was sitting with my mother-in-law in her living room watching Hannity. And I hear this scream from my mother-in-law. Because on the bottom line, going across the bottom is Rick Santorum considering running for president. And I hadn't told her that. I hadn't told me that either, but. Well, I got all sorts of press that showed up, and I thought, hey, this is a pretty good gig. Nobody was paying much attention to me. Remember, I lost by the largest margin of any incumbent senator in 30 years. So I wasn't getting a lot of press coverage. And so I decided, well, heck, worked. Let's go to New Hampshire. Got a lot of press coverage up there, and well, so we just kept doing it, and people then started, are you running? And I'd say, no, I'm walking. They said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm just trying to follow the path the Lord is leading me on because something weird is going on here. And we decided to run, and no one gave us a chance. If you ever saw the early debates down at the Reagan Library, with the airplane there, I was like behind the tail on the stage. Couldn't see me. That's why Brian Williams never asked me any questions. But that's what it was like. I mean, I got completely ignored. 22 debates. Before the last 4 debates, they added up the time, and I was last by far of all of the candidates. Next in line above me was Herman Cain, and he had 5 minutes on average more time than I did. And that included the fact that he had missed the last 5 debates because he was out of the race, and he still on average had more time than I did. But we ended up miraculously winning the Iowa caucuses, albeit late, and 10 other states. And it was a miracle. It was a miracle that we were able to pull that incredible string of victories off. But some interesting things happened to me along the way. My daughter Bella got sick in the middle of the campaign. She at the time was 3.5 years old, and she hadn't been sick for a few years, but she got very, very sick. And something happened that I didn't anticipate, because we didn't want to make Bella an issue, because I was already the social conservative candidate. I was the guy that, talked about pro-life issues and marriage and all these other things. And so I just felt like, given what had happened to previous candidates with their disabled children, in Sarah Palin's case, that I just thought we would keep Bella out of the limelight. And when she got sick and we had to take her to the hospital and we had to cancel the schedule, I couldn't do that anymore. I had to announce why I was leaving the campaign trail. It was a remarkable turn of events. I want to share this with you because, as dark as it may seem, people still see, when they see the truth, know the truth. They still know the truth. When it's easy for them to see, they'll see it. We jumped off the campaign trail and told the world that Bella was sick and just please pray for her. We ended up in the hospital. Bella has trisomy 18, which has a lot of complications, but one is respiratory. The last time she ended up in the hospital, she had the same condition. She had fluid in both of her lungs. Last time she was on a ventilator for 5 weeks. Took about almost 3 months to recover. So we went to the hospital and they did the x-ray and they showed those lungs, a picture of those lungs, and I said, well, we just thought this was it. She's going to be here for a long time. Maybe God is just saying enough's enough. And we had just lost New Hampshire and South Carolina. Florida was just up, and we were going to lose Florida too, badly probably. And so maybe this was just a sign that we had done our best and it was time to pack it in. So we stayed there with Bella that night, and we just sat there alone for the first time, and I can't even tell you how long, and just prayed. We asked the people of America to pray along with us. They didn't know who Bella was, but they knew she was sick. Well, the next day, through the night, Bella, usually who gets much, much worse at night, didn't. She actually seemed to be getting a little better, which was amazing for a compromised little girl like her. The next morning, they did x-rays on her again, and her lungs were perfectly clear. The doctors couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. Even a minor cold for Bella is a 3-week ordeal with heavy-duty drugs, lots of oxygen support. But in 12 hours, she went from 0 to 60. We went back out on the campaign trail. I'll never forget it. Went to St. Charles County, right outside of St. Louis. I drove up and we decided the next day, Sunday, to restart the campaign on Monday. We said, well, let's forget about Florida. We're going to lose Florida. Let's go on to Missouri, Minnesota, and Colorado, which were the next 3 states. So we did. And we showed up. I said, let's just do something at a community college. I'm going to talk about worker training. So I show up at the community college, and there's all these people outside the college. I said, oh, darn it. They locked the doors. They didn't let us in. Because we had less than 24 hours to organize this. And so I called my guy. I said, can you make sure they call the security, get the doors open? And they dropped me off, and it wasn't the doors weren't open. I said, that was the overflow crowd. The auditorium was jam-packed with people. Couldn't believe it. I walked in there, and what I saw amazed me. Not only people, but for the first time I noticed, maybe they were there before, I just don't remember. People in wheelchairs. A little girl, 4 or 5 years old, on her dad's shoulders. I'll never forget this sign. She had Down syndrome, which is trisomy 21. Little Bella has trisomy 18, an extra 18th chromosome. Down's is an extra 21st chromosome. And this little Down syndrome girl is holding up a sign that read, I'm for Bella's dad. The campaign changed. People changed. I'll never forget all of the people with disabilities who came out. You know what they were saying to me? All of them. Thank you. Thank you for stopping your presidential campaign for someone like me. That you see value. You see me as the same. I can't tell you the number of people who came up to me during the campaign, after the campaign, even folks on the far left, who just were amazed that I would stop a campaign. I was amazed that they were amazed. But it touched them. Well, right after that, we ended up winning 3 primary states. It was a miracle. The race turned around. I was the leading candidate for the nomination. Boom, overnight. Of course, then they just descended upon us. Everything I'd ever said and done, and I'm 16 years in public life, you say a lot of stupid things. And they pulled every one of them out. And they came after me. But they also came after me because I was the conservative, social conservative warrior. I was the extremist on all these issues. I want to read you a little passage from an article that was written during this time. It's from a guy named Joe Klein. Now, Joe Klein, if you don't know who Joe Klein is, he writes for Time magazine, wrote for the New Yorker magazine before that, New York Times. If you haven't gotten the idea of who Joe Klein is, he also is on MSNBC. So if you have any doubt who Joe Klein is. So he writes this article while all this is going on, this flurry of activity, just trying to paint me as this radical extremist on moral and cultural issues. And he writes this article called Rick Santorum's Inconvenient Truths. He says, Bob Schieffer of CBS News is usually the gold standard for sane and solid American TV journalism. And on the morning of February 19th, 2012, he was clearly nonplussed by extreme comments Rick Santorum had made about prenatal testing, quote, ends up in more abortions, public schools, quote, anachronistic, and the president's position on the environment, quote, a phony theology. So, Senator, Schieffer began, I've got to ask you, what in the world are you talking about, sir? At such a moment, the overwhelming majority of American politicians would go on the defensive, hem and haw, and respond with, well, Bob, what I really meant to say was, not Santorum. He didn't seem at all flustered. He vigorously restated the positions he had taken, in some cases eloquently. He was especially vigorous on the subject of prenatal testing, citing studies that showed that 90% of Down syndrome babies are aborted. Schieffer asked whether Santorum wanted to turn back the clock on science and ban such testing. No, Santorum replied. But the federal government, through Obamacare, should not be promoting procedures like amniocentesis, which are used for the purposes of identifying children who are disabled in the womb, in most cases eliminating them by abortion. Santorum has become the inconvenient candidate, even for those who agree with him. These are delicate issues to be handled delicately. The Right to Life movement has been particularly clever and disciplined, changing public opinion about abortion over the last 20 years. It's gone after the most egregious and grisly outliers like so-called partial birth abortion. It's gotten a major boost from science, ironically, as sonograms have made it impossible to deny that at a very early stage, that thing in the womb is a human life. Then he goes on and rips me because I had given a speech in Florida about how Satan was attacking America. He couldn't quite get his hands on the fact, neither could Schieffer, on the idea that I actually believed in Satan. So that was a big day on the campaign. I had at least 10 reporters ask me the same question. Do you actually believe in Satan? Seriously. 10 reporters, all of them just incredulous that I actually literally believed in the existence of Satan. So I told him that Jesus did, but that didn't matter to him. So he continues after the screed about how crazy I am to believe in Satan. So when you leave Satan aside, there's something admirable about Santorum's near Tourettic insistence on bringing up issues nobody else wants to talk about. His position on education, that parents need to spend more time supervising their children's schooling, draws stifled groans from overworked parents in his audience, but he's right. Parents know best how their children learn. His emphasis on the importance of intact families is undoubtedly correct as well. Every major study since the 60s has shown the disastrous result of out-of-wedlock births. Even the use of prenatal testing raises uncomfortable issues for many people. It was a sonogram that helped determine that Santorum's son, Gabriel, needed microsurgery in the womb to clear his bladder. Rick and Karen decided to fight for Gabriel's life, which nearly cost Karen her own. And they passionately embraced the child during his 2 hours of life on earth. They spent the last 3 years caring for their daughter, Isabella, whose genetic defect, trisomy 18, is an early death sentence. Yet I'm haunted by the smiling photos I've seen of Isabella with her father, mother, brothers, and sisters. No doubt she struggles through many of her days. She nearly died a few weeks ago. But she's also been granted 3 years of unconditional love and the ability to smile and bring joy. Her tenuous survival has given her family a deeper sense of how precious even the frailest of lives are. All right, I can hear you saying, the Santorum's family course may be admirable, but shouldn't we have the right to make our own choices? Yes, I suppose. But I also worry that we become too averse to personal inconvenience, that we're less rigorous than we should be, that we farmed out our responsibilities, especially for the disabled, to the state. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful to Santorum for forcing on me the discomfort of having to think about the moral implications of his daughter's smile. The truth is powerful. The truth is powerful. What you communicate here at Right to Life is powerful. Those billboards are powerful. Are they going to change someone's mind in the first glance? No. But the truth is a powerful thing. We are losing because we refuse to speak the truth. Pastors refuse to speak the truth in their pulpits. They're being bullied not to, and far too many are silent. Teachers are bullied not to speak the truth in their classroom, and far too many are silent. They fear their job. They should fear their souls. Parents are far too timid to be uncool around their kids' friends. Children want to fit in, be popular. At our business, we see the popular culture changing the rules by which we have to run our businesses. And most, like sheep, follow. Most employees don't fight back. Oh, we have bigger things to do. We can always, I've got to. We make excuses. They don't make excuses. They fight. They don't care if they lose their job. They fight. They don't care if they're unpopular at the club. They fight. They don't care about the club. People ask me all the time, what can I do? Okay, Senator, I accept the fact things are not so good. I accept the fact that the leading history textbook in America today in our schools was written by a Marxist, an anti-American Marxist. And I suspect it is widely used here in the state of California. I suspect it may be used in some of your school districts. Do you even know? So I asked the people ask me, what can I do? You know what my answer is? It's the same thing. No matter who it is, it's the same thing. My answer? Do something. One of my favorite quotes is, every day we get up and we tell ourselves lies so we can live with ourselves. 1.2 million abortions. I'm only one person, Rick. What can I do? I'm only one person. That's just bigger than me. Yeah, our religious liberty is being lost in America. They're changing it from freedom of religion to freedom of worship. Oh, you can do what you want inside the church, but once you come outside the church, you're mine, says the government. Once you start a business, you're mine. Once you walk into that school, you're mine. Now the government's in everything, government can dictate everywhere. And what do? Mostly nothing. One of my favorite authors is a guy named G.K. Chesterton, who wrote in England about 100 years ago. He was asked by a London tabloid to do an article because he was a social critic. So they said, okay, Chesterton, I want you to write a column, and the column should be entitled, "What's Wrong with the World?" Chesterton said, I'll do it. Within 24 hours, the envelope arrives at the London paper. They open it up, and here's what it said. What's wrong with the world? Title. I am. Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton. America became a great country because we fought for freedom. We pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. And we won a great freedom in the American Revolution. And many have sacrificed tremendously for that freedom. But the freedom that is at stake right now is not one that you have to put on a uniform to defend. It is in your schools, it is in your family, it is in your church, it is in politics, it is in your communities. And each and every one of you has an obligation, because we are losing America's freedom right now. When I left the presidential race, it took me about a year to figure out what to do. I wanted to do something to thank the two people that gave me this gift from the campaign, the gift of fame. People knew who I was now. Everybody in America, by and large, knew who Rick Santorum was. What do you do with that? I was given a gift by the people of this country, and I was given a gift by God because I had no right to win 11 primary states. But I did. Took about a year, but I figured out that what I could do is to try to go right at the belly of the beast, try to attack the popular culture by creating films. So I now run a film company. I produce and distribute films about faith. And the first film we're doing, that's coming out actually this month, is called One Generation Away. Most of the movies, actually all the other movies we're doing, are feature films. But this is a film called One Generation Away, based on Ronald Reagan's speech and called A Time to Choose, where he said freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And so we did a documentary on how religious liberty is being lost in America. And we're asking churches to show it in their church, because this is a message for the church. Because if we continue to stay in the church and not fight for the church, then we will lose the church. You say it can't happen. Oh, really? I mean, do you really think now, what you've seen in the last 10 years in America, that all these things that could never happen, that have happened, that this can't happen too? Of course it can happen, unless you fight back. Tonight's your opportunity to do something. You're here, you got called here to hear this message. Some of you may have a sour stomach as a result of it. I apologize for that. But you got called here, God called you here for a reason to hear this. You can't walk out here and say, I didn't know. 10, 15, 20 years from now, you say, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, I knew things were not good, but I didn't know. One of Bishop Ochoa's colleagues, Cardinal George from Chicago, made this statement back in 2009, and concerned about the loss of religious liberty in America. He said, I expect to die in my bed. This is the Cardinal from Chicago. He said, I expect to die in my bed. I expect my successor to die in prison. And I expect his successor to die a martyr. Don't walk out here and say you don't know. Don't go out and think, oh, well, come on, this is just some politician, hyperbole, that's their business. No, it's not my business. It's your business. And tonight you have something to do about it. You have a voice for truth. You're going to be asked to give some money tonight. I suspect many of you came in here thinking, oh, this is what I'll give. Let me ask you this. If you look at the Bible, and you think about what Jesus talks about, what does God bless when it comes to giving? Does he give blessings for people who give lots of money? What does he bless? It was the week before the caucus in Iowa. I was in Sioux City. I was at a church. I spoke at that church, and afterward, the pastor came up and gave me a little jewelry box. And one of those little fuzzy things, boxes. I don't get too many of those. My wife will tell you she doesn't get too many of those, but that's another story. And he said, someone just gave me these from the Holy Land. I want you to have them. I said, why? He said, well, because I see that you did what she did. I said, okay, what do you mean? He said, well, how many town hall meetings do you have here in Iowa? I said, well, 385. Average attendance, 12 people. But I kept going. I kept giving. So I opened it up, and there were two little round, looked like coins. Weren't coins sort of greenish, discolored, sort of, they're copper, I couldn't really tell. They were old. I said, what are these? He said, these are widow's mites. Remember the story of the Bible of the widow giving the widow's mite. Everything she had, she gave. God blesses people who give, not from excess. If you came here to give from, excess, and I'll just, do what's comfortable, then you're going to get the same America that we're headed toward. Politicians, we all do. We say, God bless America. How many people really believe that? How many people believe that God is going to bless this America? America that kills 1.2 million of his children. Who's taking institutions that are his, that are ordained biblically, and destroying them, tearing them asunder. How much is God going to bless America? But what we do know is if some of his people are good, some of his people stay faithful, some of his people are willing to make the sacrifices, that he will, in fact, withhold his hand. And hopefully, through his blessing, we will turn this country around. But it starts tonight. It starts right here. You have an opportunity to do something right now to make a difference on the core issue in our culture today, to help your community know the truth, to save lives, to save souls. What say you? God bless you.